The day the council carried out the execution was remembered across the galaxy as a strange, heavy day. Even people who had no interest in politics said the air felt different, like something enormous was about to shift. Stars looked the same. Ships flew as usual, but there was a quiet tension that settled on every planet connected to the council's network. No one knew exactly why they felt that way. They only knew something was wrong, and for most of them, the feeling started the moment the news spread. The council had sentenced a human to death. Humans were rare now. Some were scattered around the galaxy, living quietly, trying to stay unnoticed. But there wasn't a single human who held the kind of attention that the one on trial did. His name echoed everywhere. Hale. People repeated it even if they didn't know who he was. Hale had become a symbol, though, for what exactly depended on who you asked. To some, he was a dangerous troublemaker. To others, he was the last voice of a forgotten species trying to protect itself. And to many ordinary people, he was simply a mystery, a human who had somehow become important enough to stand before the most powerful. Council in the galaxy. The council chamber was a massive circular hall with smooth walls that shifted in color depending on the speaker. Calm blue for neutral statements, sharp red for interruptions, soft green for peaceful arguments. On most days, the hall was busy with debates about trade, territory, or environmental laws. But today, every seat was taken and every delegate sat in absolute silence, facing the single figure standing in the center. Hale was calm. He wore plain clothing, the kind given to all prisoners. There were no chains, no restraints, no guards holding him down. The council did not use visible force. It liked to show that its decisions were orderly, civilized, and controlled. But the silent drones circling above him made it clear what would happen if he tried to move. Observers said the atmosphere felt strange when Hale looked up at the delegates. He didn't look angry or frightened. Instead, he looked tired, like someone who had been fighting for much longer than most people realized. He stood tall, yet there was a heaviness in the way he breathed. Anyone watching closely could see it. The chief speaker of the council, a tall creature with thin silver lines across its face, began the final statement. It spoke slowly, each word echoing through the hall. The council believed in ceremony. It believed that every major action should feel official and unquestionable. So the speaker described Hale's actions as a threat to unity, a danger to stability, and a spark that could disrupt the delicate balance of peace. Exact details were kept vague, as they usually were during high-risk cases. The council preferred that the galaxy trusted its decisions without asking too many questions. While the speaker talked, the audience, composed of representatives from dozens of species, watched Hale, waiting for him to interrupt, to protest, to shout something dramatic. But he didn't. He simply listened, eyes steady, shoulders relaxed. A few observers later said that his calmness was the most unsettling part of the entire event. People expect anger or fear in moments like that. They don't expect acceptance. When the council finished reading the verdict, the hall went silent. Again, the silence stretched long enough for people to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Hale finally lifted his head and said a single sentence. His voice was not loud, but the quiet carried it across the room. "You think this will save you," he said, "but this is the mistake that will burn the galaxy." No one knew exactly what he meant. Some delegates flinched. Others rolled their eyes. A few looked afraid, though they pretended not to be. The council speaker ignored his words, as if they were nothing more than a prisoner's dramatic last attempt to sound important. The sentence was carried out quickly and without spectacle. There was no violence, no display, nothing that would break the council's rules about dignity and order. It was all done in a quiet, controlled, almost clinical way. One moment Howell stood there. The next, he was gone. The drones dimmed their lights and drifted upward, signaling the end. A soft tone played through the hall, the same tone used when passing new laws. The council wanted this moment to be remembered as a legal action, not a dramatic one. But of course, the galaxy remembered it very differently. The first group to react was the media. Reporters filed out of the hall, speaking into their recorders, trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. Some described Hale's final words as a threat, others called it a warning. A few said it was simply the last defiance of someone who believed he was right. Every news network released a different version of the same event, but all of them used the same phrase, the execution of a human. It was the phrase that caught the galaxy's attention. Humans had always been a complicated subject for the council. They were known for their resilience, their stubbornness, and their ability to survive almost anywhere. Even after their population dropped drastically, their reputation remained tangled in stories, some heroic, some frightening. People were never sure how much was true. But because of those stories, the idea of executing a human made many citizens uneasy, even if they didn't understand why. Across different planets, reactions varied. Some people gathered in bars and small markets, talking in nervous voices about the council's decision. Others stood in front of public screens, replaying Hale's last moments, trying to read meaning in his expression. Children on distant colonies asked their parents why everyone was suddenly whispering about humans again. Even those who cared little for politics felt the shift, a slight tension that didn't exist the day before. On the outer rim of the galaxy, the far edges where the council's control weakened, whispers spread even faster. These were places where old stories were told freely, where people remembered the past differently, and where humans still lived in hidden groups. Some of them watched the footage with trembling hands. Some cried, some clenched their fists. They all knew something would happen next, even if they couldn't explain how they knew. It was not anger that filled them, but a cold certainty. In one dusty trading station, a quiet human mechanic turned off the screen after watching Hale disappear. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, he simply said, he warned them. His voice carried no excitement, only a quiet sadness, as if he had seen the ending of a story he hoped would never come true. Meanwhile, in the council's main tower, delegates gathered privately to discuss public reactions. They were surprised by how fast the unease was spreading. They had expected some tension, but not at this scale. They reassured themselves that order would return in a few days. People would calm down. Life would continue as usual, but not everyone. And the council was so confident. A few quietly admitted that Hale's warning had shaken them. They didn't understand what he meant, but they felt that something about the tone of his voice, the calmness in his eyes, the timing of everything. It unsettled them more than they cared to admit. The council decided to release official statements explaining that the execution was necessary, legal, and carefully reviewed. They stressed that it was done for the sake of safety and stability. They wanted reassurance to replace fear. But in most places, the explanations did not help. Instead, people noticed how quickly the council released them, which only made them more suspicious. As they turned to night across different star systems, the footage of Hale's final moment continued to replay. Social hubs discussed it. Ships streamed it to passengers. Teachers whispered about it after classes. Even those who barely followed galactic news watched it once, then again, as if trying to understand why a single human's death mattered so much. Some believed it was because humans were rare. Others thought it was because Hale looked far too calm. But deep down, many felt an instinctive sense of danger, something old and unexplainable, like the feeling before a violent storm, when the sky grows quiet in a way that doesn't feel natural. By the end of the day, fear had begun spreading faster than information. And in the places where humans still hid, Scattered across forgotten moons and quiet stations, a message began passing from one group to another. Hale is gone. Prepare yourselves. It started small, almost like a rumor. But rumors have power. They move faster than truth, especially when people are already anxious. And as the message traveled from one human settlement to another, an old network one that had been silent for years began waking up. The council ended the day believing they had restored peace. But in reality, the galaxy had already begun to shift. The quiet before the storm was growing heavier. Hale's warning echoed everywhere, repeated in low voices, replayed in screens, whispered in frightened conversations. That it was the day the council thought they ended a threat. But it was the day they unknowingly lit the first spark, because Hale was right. The galaxy was about to burn. After Hale's execution, the galaxy did not explode into chaos overnight. It started quietly, almost gently, the way small cracks appear in a wall long before the wall collapses. At first, most people tried to live normally. Ships carried goods. Between planets, markets opened at the usual hour, and children played in the dusty courtyards of distant colonies. But beneath the normal routine, something had changed. People moved a little faster. They spoke in softer voices, and they kept glancing at the sky as if something might fall from it. The real change began far away from the bright center of the council's territory, out near the outer rim. These were places the council liked to call calm zones, though. Anyone who lived there knew the truth. They were forgotten zones. The council sent laws, but rarely sent help. The people there learned to survive on their own, relying on whatever they had, repairing old machines until they nearly fell apart. Life was tough, but it was familiar. And humans, those who still existed, often hid in these places. One of the first signs appeared on a small mining planet covered in red dust. Workers there spent long days digging minerals for trade, living in simple shelters and eating whatever shipments arrived on time. They did not follow council politics closely. Most of them didn't care about big decisions happening light years away. But when the news reached them, something strange happened. A group of workers gathered around an old screen in the center of their settlement, watching Hale's final moment again and again. Some of them had never seen a human before, except in old documentaries. A few recognized him from rumors, but most just stared at the calm expression he wore, even in his last breath. One worker, a quiet person known for fixing broken engines, whispered, if they executed him, something must be coming. Another shrugged. Maybe it's just politics. It has nothing to do with us. But the first worker shook their head. Humans don't go down quietly. Everyone knows that. The group looked uneasy, but no one said more. They simply returned to their tasks. Yet there was a feeling like the first wind before a storm hovering around them. Across the galaxy, similar reactions started appearing. On a trading ship drifting between moons, a crew watched the recording in the mess hall. One crew member leaned back and said, I heard humans have old networks still active. Hidden groups. What if this wakes them up? Another laughed. Hidden groups? You sound like those old storytellers in the markets. But the laughter faded quickly. Deep down, everyone had heard the same whispers. Everyone knew humans were survivors. And when survivors are pushed too far, nobody knows what they might do. In a quiet station built inside an asteroid, an old trader received a message on a device so ancient that most modern scanners couldn't read it. The message was short, just 4 words. Hale is gone. Prepare. The trader stared at the message a long time. He wasn't human, but he had lived among humans once, long ago, and he knew their history better than most. He turned off the device and locked it away, realizing this message would not have been sent unless something serious was happening. Meanwhile, The council tried to calm the galaxy with public statements. They spoke about peace, safety, and the need for unity. They claimed everything was under control. But their messages felt too polished, too smooth, like they were trying to hide cracks under fresh paint. People noticed the carefully chosen words, the practiced smiles, the way certain details were never clearly explained. Some citizens started to feel suspicious. Others felt afraid. But on the outer rim, fear slowly evolved into something else. Movement. It began when small things went wrong. A supply ship vanished, with its signal suddenly cut off. A communication tower on a moon went offline without warning. Then a council storage facility reported missing equipment. Nothing dangerous, but unusual navigation chips, old radio parts, energy cells. Items that seemed worthless to most people, but very useful for someone needing to build something. Secretly. At first, the council dismissed these things as small disruptions. The galaxy was huge. Mistakes happened. Equipment failed. Ships got lost. But then it happened again, and again. And each time, the people responsible were never caught and never identified. Out in the hidden corners of the galaxy, humans began, moving quietly. They did not gather in large groups or make public announcements. They worked in shadows, speaking only when needed. Some of them had been waiting years for a sign. Hale's death was that sign. A mechanic in a deserted fuel station received a coded transmission late at night. They listened to it once, then destroyed it. Without a word, they walked to their workshop, opened a hidden compartment under the floor, and took out a device wrapped in old cloth. They hadn't used it in years, but they powered it on and watched as a soft blue light filled the room. The mechanic whispered, "It's time." In another corner of the galaxy, on a cold moon, where humans lived in underground shelters, a teacher gathered a small group of listeners. They spoke calmly, saying, "The council thought removing him would make us weaker, but they only reminded us of what we lost." The group nodded, their faces lit by a single lantern. They did not speak loudly, but the determination in their eyes said enough. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens who had never met a human began noticing new rumors spreading through markets and transit hubs. Some said a hidden human fleet existed, scattered but not destroyed, waiting for a reason to unite. Others spoke about old technology humans had hidden before their population declined. None of these stories were confirmed, but none were dismissed either. Fear fed imagination. Imagination fed fear. And both spread faster than any official message the council tried to send. Even merchants traveling between planets noticed shifts in behavior. At checkpoints, guards looked more nervous. On some worlds, people stocked extra supplies, unsure what was coming. Even the silence felt different, like everyone was listening for something they could not yet hear. Inside the council's main tower, the mood grew tense. Delegates argued privately. Some said the galaxy was simply reacting to the shock of an execution. Others warned that humans were unpredictable. A few believed Hale's warning might have been genuine. One delegate, known for speaking carefully, finally said, "We may have triggered something we do not understand." But instead of investigating deeper, the council chose the easiest path. They focused on maintaining order. They increased patrols in certain regions, sent messages of reassurance, and attempted to control media reports. They believed that if they appeared confident, the galaxy would follow. But confidence meant nothing when the outer rim started to flicker with small incidents. A remote transport ship reported seeing unknown beacons blinking in space, forming patterns no one recognized. On a quiet moon, someone spotted a symbol carved into a rock, an old human symbol that had not been used for decades. And on a trading route near the edge of council territory, a damaged drone was found floating, its memory wiped clean except for one phrase left behind: "We remember." These small signs meant nothing to most species, but humans understood them immediately. Something old was awakening, something carefully hidden, and though there was no violence, no battles, no open conflict, the unease grew thicker each day. People felt it in the way their neighbors acted, in the way the stars seemed too quiet, in the way messages took a little longer to arrive. The galaxy had become a giant stage where everyone sensed a play was about to begin, but no one knew the script. A merchant on a desert world said it best while sitting outside his stall. "It's like the whole galaxy is holding its breath." He was not wrong, because while the council tried to pretend nothing was happening, humans across the outer rim were preparing. They didn't talk about revenge. They didn't talk about war. They talked about surviving. They talked about not letting Hale's warning fade. And every day, more people, human and non-human, began to feel the same truth rising inside them. The execution had not ended anything. It had started something, and whatever was coming next was already moving through the shadows, gathering strength in the quiet places of the galaxy. After the small signs scattered through the outer rim, something larger began to form quietly, secretly, like a distant signal becoming clearer each day. At first, only a few people noticed, then a few more, and slowly the galaxy became aware that something hidden had started moving beneath the surface. The people who noticed it first were those living far from the center. They were used to hearing strange signals from old satellites or broken machines drifting in space. But this time, the signals sounded different. There were repeating patterns, soft pulses, and coded messages that didn't match any regular communication channels. Most citizens ignored them, assuming it was interference or leftover noise from ancient machines. But the humans hiding on the rim recognized the patterns immediately. They were old codes, older than most of the colonies that existed now, codes used before humans scattered across the galaxy. These codes were called Ember Lines, and they were created many years ago when a group of humans realized they might one day need a way to reconnect if they were pushed too far apart. These codes were simple, but built with a quiet kind of genius. They were designed so that no matter how much time passed or how many systems changed, humans would still understand them. The signals had been silent for years until Hale's execution. Moment the news spread, the Ember Lines began to wake like old machines shaking off dust. One signal pulsed from a forgotten satellite. Another came from a damaged beacon hidden in an asteroid. More signals followed, appearing in strange corners of the galaxy, corners most people didn't even know existed. The first humans to respond were those living in small settlements, working simple jobs, trying not to attract attention. A worker, repairing solar panels on a dry moon, paused when their old wrist device began blinking a pattern they had not seen since childhood. They pressed a few buttons, listened carefully, then closed their eyes. "It's real," they whispered. "It's starting." On a frozen planet where humans mined ice, a group gathered in a storage room, listening to the same signal through a rusty speaker. They exchanged looks filled with worry and determination. One of them finally said, "The Ember Network is active." The others nodded slowly. They didn't cheer or celebrate. They simply understood what it meant. The Ember Network wasn't an army. It wasn't a political group. It was a quiet, scattered organization created long ago to protect humans from disappearing. It had no leaders, only guides. It had no headquarters, only hidden places where messages could be stored. And it wasn't created to fight. It was created to help humans survive in a galaxy that didn't fully trust them. For years, the Ember Network had stayed silent because it believed the galaxy no longer saw humans as a threat. But Hale was part of the old network. And Hale's execution activated the final signal, of failsafe he had prepared decades earlier. Long before most people even knew his name, the failsafe was simple. If Hale ever fell into the hands of the Council and did not return, signals would activate across the galaxy, not to attack, not to destroy, just to awaken the humans who were scattered and remind them that they still had each other. But the Council didn't know this. And if they had, they would never have believed the network could still work after so many years. They underestimated human memory. They underestimated human patience. While these signals spread quietly, the outer rim began changing in ways the Council did not notice. Humans who usually avoided contact started traveling. They boarded old ships, walked through dusty markets, and visited forgotten stations that most citizens didn't even know were still active. A traveler on a worn cargo ship noticed two strangers, speaking in hushed tones, drawing strange shapes on a piece of metal. When the traveler asked what they were doing, one of the strangers smiled politely and said, "Just remembering an old language." But the traveler felt uneasy, sensing something deeper happening. In a marketplace on a floating city, an elderly human traded a small metal chip to a younger human. The younger one held it like it was a treasure and said softly, "Will it still work after all this time?" The elder nodded slowly. "It will. These things were built for the darkest days." These exchanges were small and easy to overlook, but together they formed a pattern. Humans were waking up. Meanwhile, people from other species noticed the change, too, but they didn't understand its meaning. Traders whispered about groups of humans gathering at docking stations. Pilots mentioned seeing human ships flying in unusual formations, not dangerous, just organized, like they were following a plan. Some believed humans were preparing for rebellion. Others thought they were simply frightened after Hale's death and were trying to protect themselves. No one truly knew the purpose. Only the humans understood the network's intention. In the inner worlds, the Council began to sense that something wasn't right. Reports from outer zones became more frequent. Not warnings, just oddities. Unauthorized signals detected. Unknown transmissions intercepted. Humans seen in places they don't usually gather. One delegate, known for studying human behavior, said during a quiet meeting, "We may have awakened something old. Humans respond differently to pressure than most species. They don't scatter, they connect." Another delegate shook their head. "Humans are too few to matter." But the first delegate replied, "It takes only a small flame to start a fire." The Council didn't take the warning seriously. They believed numbers were everything. They believed power came from size and strength. They didn't understand the deeper truth. Power sometimes comes from unity, even if the group is small. Across the galaxy, the Ember Network began to rebuild itself. The first step was communication. Humans sent messages through hidden lines that only their own people recognized. They used old frequencies, simple patterns, and words that sounded meaningless to outsiders. These messages said things like, "Find the path, and the ashes are moving, and stay unseen, but stay ready." These words didn't mean much on their own, but humans understood them. They were reminders of survival plans, created long ago. The second step was gathering information. Humans traveled quietly, observing the way the Council reacted to the growing fear. They listened to rumors in spaceports, watched news broadcasts, and studied changes in patrol routes. They did nothing to draw attention, nothing that could be seen as a threat. They simply watched and learned. A human traveler sat in a crowded shuttle, listening to two passengers discussing the strange signals from the rim. The traveler didn't speak, just listened closely, filing the information away to pass along. Later, another human sat in a small cafe on a busy world, looking like an ordinary customer. But they were actually recording movements of Council drones outside the window, counting numbers, watching patterns. The Ember Network grew stronger not through confrontation, but through quiet observation. And each new detail added strength to the growing connection between scattered humans. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens who were not part of the network began feeling something too, even if they didn't understand it. Many had never cared about humans before, but now they watched them closely, sensing the tension around them. Fear mixed with curiosity, and in some places, sympathy emerged too. A shop owner on a crowded world saw a human traveler buying food and noticed the tired look in their eyes. The shop owner didn't know anything about the network or the signals, but they felt an instinct to speak softly and say, "You should take care of yourself. Times feel strange lately." The human simply nodded in thanks and walked away. Even though the galaxy was moving toward uncertainty, small moments of kindness still existed. By now, the Ember Network had connected dozens of human groups across the rim. They did not meet physically in large groups, because that would attract attention. Instead, they shared information through coded messages and trusted messengers. They strengthened old alliances quietly, carefully, like rebuilding a fragile structure. Piece by piece, what surprised most humans was how quickly the network grew. It was as if every human, no matter how far away, had been waiting for a sign. Hale's execution became that sign, not because of anger or revenge, but because it reminded them of something important. Humans were disappearing, and if they didn't hold together, they might vanish completely. The final step of the networks. Awakening came when an old beacon one believed to be broken lit up on a small moon. Its light was dim at first, then brightened, sending a long pulse into the sky. That pulse traveled across systems, bouncing through hidden receivers, reaching places it had not reached in decades. When humans saw the signal, they understood instantly. It was not a call for war. It was a call to come home. Across the outer rim, silent humans lifted their heads. Some smiled softly. Others sighed with relief. A few felt tears in their eyes. The signal meant the network was fully alive. It meant they were no longer scattered strangers. They were connected again. And as the signal spread farther, even non-humans began to sense the shift. They didn't know what the signal meant, but they felt the weight of it like a quiet truth. Passing through the galaxy. The Council didn't understand the signal. They saw it only as a possible threat. They didn't know it was simply a gathering point, a light for lost people to find each other. But misunderstanding can be dangerous, especially when powerful groups grow fearful. The Ember Network did not want conflict. It did not want chaos. It simply won. The galaxy did not fall apart suddenly. It shifted slowly, like a huge machine turning in a new direction without warning. Most people didn't notice at first. They went to work, opened shops, traveled between worlds, and tried to ignore the strange feeling in the air. But small changes were happening everywhere, and each change added more weight to the growing tension. The first major shift came when a group of traders, passing through the outer rim, saw something unusual from the windows of their ship. Far away in the darkness, a long trail of light stretched across space thin, bright, and moving in a pattern that didn't match any known route. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a natural event. It was something else. When the traders reported it to the nearest station, the message traveled quickly across the network. People began whispering that the humans were rising. Others said the Ember Network had launched beacons into the sky. No one knew for sure, but the sight frightened some and fascinated others. The Council tried to calm the rumors, saying the lights were only reflections from drifting ice crystals. But the explanation felt weak, and the citizens could tell. The real shift started a few days later when the Council's archival moon suddenly went dark. The archival moon was a quiet place filled with history, records, and old machines. There were no weapons there, no soldiers, nothing dangerous. It simply stored memories, laws, maps, past agreements, and information about old species. People rarely thought about it because it never caused trouble. But one morning, all communication with it disappeared. The council claimed there was a technical failure, but citizens across the galaxy didn't believe that. A place that important didn't just turn off. Something had happened, and even though the council insisted nothing serious was wrong, everyone felt the truth. The galaxy had reached a turning point. People began to panic quietly. Not loudly, not with shouting, but with nervous movements locking their doors earlier, stocking up on supplies, canceling travel plans, checking news screens more often than usual. Conversations in public areas became shorter. Families whispered to each other at home. Even the stars seemed colder somehow. What made the fear worse was that no one knew what the humans were actually doing. There were no attacks, no threats, no loud declarations. Humans were moving silently, gathering in the shadows, and that silence frightened people far more than open conflict ever could. The council tried increasing patrols in the outer rim. They sent ships with bright blue lights and loud broadcasts demanding calm. But the more they tried to control the situation, the more people sensed they were losing control. Some citizens even said the council was afraid, and when the council is afraid, everyone else becomes twice as scared. In shops and cafes across the central worlds, ordinary people talked about the rising tension. One shop owner said, "It's like everyone is waiting for something, but no one knows what." A traveler replied, "Maybe the humans want revenge." But an older person nearby shook their head and said, "Humans don't do things without a reason. Something bigger must be happening." These small conversations were happening everywhere, and although they were simple words, they showed how deeply the fear had spread. In the outer rim, however, the mood was different. People living there had seen strange events before. They were used to the council ignoring them and used to surviving without help. When the Ember Network signals appeared, many Rimworlders felt more curiosity than fear. A merchant selling handmade tools leaned back in his chair as he watched small groups of humans moving through the market with quiet purpose. "They don't look angry," he said to a friend. "They look focused." His friend nodded. "Like they know something the rest of us don't." And that was true. Humans did know something. Hale's message had not been a threat. It had been a warning. And the Ember Network had spent years preparing for the moment when the galaxy would need that warning. Still, even inside the network, not everyone knew the full plan. Many humans only knew small parts. They followed signals, shared information, and moved carefully, but they didn't fully understand what the network was building. Some asked questions, and the answers were always the same. Wait, watch, stay ready. Meanwhile, the council was becoming increasingly desperate. Meetings grew longer. Delegates spoke louder. Reports came in from across the galaxy. Humans gathering in abandoned stations, humans repairing old ships, humans sending coded messages through strange channels. None of these actions were violent, yet they frightened the council more than any. Open attack. They feared what they could not understand. One delegate finally said during a private meeting, "If we push them any further, we may cause the very disaster we're trying to prevent." Another responded, "If we do nothing, the galaxy may fall apart anyway." And the room fell silent, because neither answer felt right. They were trapped in a situation they had created. Outside the council's walls, the galaxy began to split into groups. Some planets supported the humans quietly, believing they were being treated unfairly. Others were terrified of them and demanded protection. Many worlds simply wished to stay neutral, hoping the storm would pass without reaching them. On one peaceful world, a teacher stood before a group of young learners and tried to explain what was happening. They said, "Sometimes fear spreads faster than truth. We must stay calm and remember that not everything we hear is real." But even as they spoke, Their own voice trembled slightly, because they, too, felt unsure about what truly set everything into motion was a single moment that happened without warning. A large station near the rim picked up a strange signal long, steady and brighter than any ember line signal they had seen before. It pulsed through every system on the station, glowing on screens, humming through wires, lighting up panels that hadn't worked in years. When technicians decoded it, they found a simple message: "We have waited long enough." The message wasn't threatening. It wasn't angry, but it carried weight, like the final piece of a puzzle falling into place. The people on the station stared at the message for a long time, unsure what it meant. But humans across the galaxy knew instantly. It meant the Ember network had reached full strength. It meant the quiet phase was ending. It meant something big was about to happen. The council received the message too, and panic exploded among the delegates. Some demanded immediate action. Others argued that they must negotiate. Many simply didn't know what to do. They realized too late that they had misunderstood the humans from the start. They believed humans wanted power, but humans only wanted survival, and survival can make people stronger than anyone expects. In the days that followed, the galaxy entered a strange state. Nothing violent happened, no attacks, no ships fired on each other, and yet everyone felt the heat rising, like a fire hidden under the floorboards. People could feel the ember glow, even though they couldn't see flames. Ships began avoiding certain routes. Markets closed earlier than usual. Pilots whispered about ghost signals in space. Families stored extra food. Governments asked for calm, but calm was almost impossible now. Fear had taken root too deeply. On one busy planet, a group of citizens gathered at a public screen as a news broadcast played. The reporter spoke in a shaky voice, saying the council was monitoring the situation. When the broadcast ended, people stared at the screen silently. One person murmured, "If the council is nervous, we should be terrified." But in the outer rim, a small human group stood together watching the stars. They were not frightened. They were tired, but their eyes were steady. One of them whispered, "The galaxy always feared humans, but we never wanted this." Another replied softly, "Fear has its own path." Across the galaxy, people began to understand that this was no longer about the council or humans alone. This was about everyone. The galaxy was changing, and no one could stop it from moving forward. But the final shift, the one that made the galaxy truly ignite, was not violent and not dramatic. It was simple. It was a single moment. A ship traveling through deep space saw a distant object glowing in the darkness. At first, the pilot thought it was a star, but as the ship drew closer, the light resolved into a floating structure enormous, covered in markings no one had seen in decades. The ship scanned it and discovered something shocking. It was human-built, and it had been waiting in silence for years. The discovery spread across the galaxy within hours. Every news network covered it. Every planet discussed it. And the council realized they had lost control of the narrative. Citizens didn't listen to their explanations anymore. They were focused entirely on the mysterious human structure shining. In the void, people didn't know what it meant. Humans knew only part of it. But everyone understood one thing. The galaxy had entered a new era, and nothing would ever be the same again. The fire had finally caught, and soon the whole galaxy would feel its heat. The discovery of the old human structure floating in deep space changed the entire rhythm of the galaxy. Before that, everyone was only guessing what humans were doing. People had fears, doubts, and theories, but nothing solid. But now, they had proof, something real, something massive, something created long before anyone realized humans were capable of such work. The structure didn't move. It didn't send signals. It didn't show any signs of threat. It simply existed in the knee. Darkness, glowing softly, like a quiet reminder that history had deeper layers than anyone imagined. Some called it a relic. Others called it a beacon. A few believed it was a warning, but no one could deny its presence. And that alone was enough to disturb the balance. News spread like wildfire. Every planet with a communication tower had screens showing the same image. A huge metallic ring, old but perfectly preserved, floating silently among the stars. Reporters spoke in cautious voices, unsure whether they should sound concerned or impressed. On one busy world, crowds gathered around. Giant screens in the central plaza. People stood shoulder to shoulder, watching experts analyze the shape of the structure. One expert said, "Its design is too advanced for the time humans supposedly built it." Another replied, "Maybe humans were never as simple as we thought." These words made the crowd murmur. People exchanged nervous glances, and someone whispered, "If this is what they built before, what are they building now?" The council met immediately after the image went public. Their meeting hall filled with delegates, all talking over each other. They demanded answers. They asked who had allowed humans to build something so large without the council noticing. They argued about whether the structure should be studied, ignored, or destroyed. But no one could agree on anything. One delegate finally stood and said, "The galaxy is losing trust in us. We need to act before the situation collapses." Another replied, "Act how? Every option we choose could make things worse." Meanwhile, humans across the galaxy reacted very differently. When they saw the structure on their screens, many stopped in their tracks. Some stared with wide eyes, some smiled faintly, and some whispered as if greeting an old friend. They recognized something deeper than anyone else did. That structure wasn't just a relic. It was a message from the past, built by those who had lived long before the current generation. In quiet corners of space stations, small groups of humans gathered around screens. Their faces didn't show fear. Instead, they looked calm, almost relieved. One human softly said, "So it has finally been found." Another answered, "It means the time is close." Most people overhearing these words didn't understand them, and that confusion made everything more mysterious. Soon, rumors took over. People claimed there were more human structures hidden in uncharted regions. Some said the humans had built a network that stretched across the galaxy long before anyone realized. Others believed the structure was a shelter, or a vault, or even a transportation gate. No one knew what was true. And the more people talked, the more the tension grew. Shops filled with customers buying supplies. Travelers canceled their trips and waited for updates. Even the usual busy markets of the inner planets grew quieter. It was as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to unfold. But the most interesting reactions came from the outer rim. There, many people weren't surprised at all. Rimworlders had always lived close to strange events, odd signals, abandoned stations, unexplained lights. They had long believed the galaxy held secrets kept hidden by powerful groups. So when the human structure was revealed, they simply nodded and said, "We knew there was more." On one dusty rimworld, a mechanic stood outside his workshop and watched the broadcast on a small screen. He wiped his hands on his apron and said to a traveler, "The council pretended humans were weak. But look at that thing. You don't build something like that unless you have a reason." A traveler nodded. Maybe the humans were waiting for this moment. The mechanic replied, "Or maybe the galaxy wasn't ready to know." Back at the council headquarters, anxiety grew with every passing hour. Reports from citizens flooded in. Some demanded protection. Others demanded answers. A few even demanded the council apologize to humans for years of mistreatment. The council tried to calm the public, but nothing worked. People wanted truth, not speeches. Meanwhile, The Ember Network watched everything unfold with quiet focus. Their signals spread through hidden channels, contacting groups that had been waiting patiently. Humans who had been living ordinary lives suddenly received coded messages telling them to travel, gather, or prepare. But the strange thing was, none of these messages were threatening. They didn't talk about war or conflict. They spoke only about readiness, unity, and truth. One message said, "The galaxy must remember." Another said, "The old paths are opening again." Most non-humans didn't understand what these messages meant, but they felt uneasy hearing them. Messages that spoke calmly, but carried hidden meaning always made people more nervous than loud threats ever could. The structure itself remained silent, but that silence held power. A team of researchers eventually traveled to study it up close. They scanned it, touched its surface, and tried to understand its design. The surprising part was that the entire structure felt warm, as if it still had energy inside it, energy that hadn't faded over time. One researcher reported back, "It's not damaged, it's not broken, it's sleeping." That single word sleeping sent shock across the galaxy. If the structure was sleeping, it meant it could wake. And if it could wake, then everyone wondered what would happen when it did. The council immediately ordered the team to leave the site, worried that further investigation might trigger something. They sent guards to patrol the area, but many citizens feared it was already too late. Once something hidden is revealed, it can never be covered again. More strange events followed. Across several planets, old machines, ancient devices no one remembered how to use, suddenly flickered with life. Screens glowed briefly, showing symbols that matched the markings on the human structure. Doors in abandoned stations slid open as if they recognized something. Lights flickered in tunnels that had been dark for years. These events frightened many people. But humans watching these changes didn't panic. Instead, they seemed thoughtful, almost reflective. A group of humans on a space station stood near. A viewing window as lights from an old beacon flashed below. One whispered, "The network is connecting again." Another added, "It waited for us to be ready." Others around them felt confused. "Ready for what?" someone asked. The humans didn't answer, not because they wanted to hide something, but because even they did not fully know. They only understood that something old was waking up, something made long ago to guide them when the time arrived. The council held another emergency meeting. This time, the room was tense enough to feel heavy. The highest-ranking leaders sat around a long table, analyzing reports and arguing about possible actions. A leader finally stood and said, "If we treat this situation with fear, the galaxy will collapse into chaos. We need communication, not force." Another replied, "And if humans refuse to speak, what then?" The first leader answered, "Then we listen to what their actions are telling us." But not everyone agreed. Some insisted humans were preparing for domination. Others argued that reacting with hostility would be the real disaster. And so, the council stayed stuck, unable to make a solid decision, while the galaxy grew increasingly restless. On the opposite side of the stars, the Ember Network made a final preparation step. They activated a soft signal, almost like a heartbeat, that spread outward from several hidden stations. The signal wasn't loud or disruptive. Most systems didn't even detect it. But humans felt it immediately, like a gentle pull somewhere inside them. This caused many humans to gather in open areas, public squares, station viewing decks, quiet hillsides on distant planets. They stood silently, looking at the sky. They weren't afraid. They weren't angry. They simply felt something calling them, a connection they had forgotten, but now remembered. Non-humans watched with confusion. "What are they doing?" someone asked in a crowded cafe. A friend replied, "It looks like they're waiting, but for what?" Then something unexpected happened. A quiet human in a small settlement stepped forward, lifted a simple device, and played a soft tone. It wasn't a weapon or a signal meant to scare anyone. It was a melody gentle, calm, almost comforting. Other humans recognized it instantly. They joined in, humming the same tune. Across distant worlds, the same sound spread as more humans joined. People listening didn't understand the meaning, but they felt the emotion behind it, something deep, old, and strangely peaceful. It didn't sound like a call to action. It sounded like a memory, a reminder, a promise. The galaxy fell quiet to listen, and in that silence, everyone finally realized something important. Humans were not preparing for destruction. They were preparing for truth. Whatever the ancient structure represented, even the council could see. Now, it was not a threat. It was a part of a story that had been hidden for far too long. A story that humans were ready to bring into the light. The galaxy had been filled with fear, but now something new was rising. Not fire dot, not conflict, but understanding dot and the moment. That understanding reached full strength. Everything would change.